After arranging our dining room, we rarely used it. We preferred the warm and inviting atmosphere of the kitchen, and that had been our habit for a long time. I had set up my work desk there, and its beautifully intricate design provided plenty of space to organize everything I needed. I admit, I was a bit obsessive about cleanliness, and I loved the soft, diffused light that filled the room. Then she entered. The sharp tapping of her new high heels echoed against the floor, announcing her presence. She called out to me, but I was too engrossed in my work to respond. Only after I finished did I finally call back, "I'm here. Can you come in for a minute?" She rolled her eyes before stepping into the doorway. "What is it?" she asked impatiently, clearly in a hurry. I pulled her close and wrapped my arms around her. At 47, she was tall and graceful, with an enticing figure. Her curves were beautifully balanced, not too prominent but still captivating. Since she had never had children, she hadn't faced the struggles of post-pregnancy weight gain. Her weight remained almost the same as when we had married 27 years ago. I had always admired her rich chestnut hair, but when she dyed it blonde 4 months ago, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of disappointment. She no longer looked quite like herself. Maybe I was just being partial. "I won't take long," I assured her. "Besides, I have a feeling your meeting might be canceled. Let's go, and I'll leave you in peace to finish this up. You've made it clear where you prefer me to be." She sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes before sitting across from me. "Thanks. As I said, I'll be brief." I continued. "I want you to think carefully and be honest. This isn't just a theoretical question. Tell me, in financial terms, how much do you think intimacy with you is worth? Do you believe different actions have different values?" I paused for a moment before continuing. "I know escorts have varying rates. I'm not exactly sure how much women charge for their companionship, but I imagine it's quite a bit. I need your help in establishing a benchmark for some research. In your opinion, would your value be closer to that of a high-class courtesan, or would it be more in line with a street worker? Or should I aim for something in between?" I took a breath before adding, "Should I factor in things like enthusiasm, expertise, and seductive elements, like lingerie, mood lighting candles, or indulgences like strawberries and chocolate? I'm also considering the allure of motels and similar locations." I observed her expression shift as I spoke. Her mouth opened slightly in disbelief, but she quickly closed it. "What are you talking about? This isn't funny, Donald. It's ridiculous," she snapped, using my full name, a clear sign of irritation. I knew that if I pushed further, she would explode in anger. "Oh, I get it, Sherry. It's absurd, just like everything else has been since you started flirting with Jameson." "So it's Jameson now, is it?" I added sarcastically. "What a pretentious name. He's just some country bumpkin in a suit. His friends call him Jimmy Jam, and honestly, that name suits him better." Her eyes narrowed, and I could sense the storm brewing. "Go on, Mount St. Helens. Erupt already." I muttered under my breath. "I've told you before, there's nothing going on between us. He doesn't even mean that much to me." "Is that really what this is about?" she fired back, visibly upset. "I swear, if you mention him again, I'm walking out." I couldn't stop myself from smirking. Jameson, Jimmy Jam. Sounds like a rapper's name, doesn't it? Some backwoods musician rhyming about his pickup truck, wild parties, and maybe even affairs with married women. I see a bright future ahead for him. Plenty of money, plenty of scandal. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a narrow gaze. She was starting to understand where I was going with this. "I'm really sorry, Sherry," I said, my tone shifting. "I got sidetracked. It won't happen again. Let's focus on something more practical." To be honest, I had my doubts about moving here at first, but as my career continued to flourish, I found myself appreciating this place more and more. Yesterday had been enjoyable. I even managed to squeeze in a round of golf in the last week of February. The weather had been unpredictable, but I had decided to stay here regardless. And do you know what I love most about this state? It's one of the few places where you can still file an alienation of affection lawsuit. You can legally sue someone for interfering in your marriage, a rarity these days. Of course, winning requires specific conditions, but the possibility is there and I find it fascinating. That's why I've thrown myself into this research. I'm compiling a comprehensive report detailing behaviors in question, their frequency, and the methods I've used to collect evidence. I have several video recordings and multiple witnesses, which provide a solid foundation for my findings. However, I need your input. How much do you think a night with you is worth? Consider it a consultation with an expert. My lawyer found my idea amusing, but ultimately saw its potential. With legal precedent backing us, this could change how people perceive these lawsuits, raising financial stakes and leading to more settlements. This would benefit both attorneys and make it easier for judges to determine appropriate compensation. I need your cooperation. If you refuse, my lawyer will ensure that your involvement is documented in detail, step by step. These are the statements I require, and you should think about the advantages you might gain once our separation and divorce are finalized. After that, any shared expenses will end. We won't even need a formal notice, just a quick visit to his office. Consider how much you and Jameson could save on gas and hotel costs if you started living together. Oh, and by the way, he does have a spare room, assuming he can convince his wife to agree. I disclose my discoveries to her, and she intends to utilize them in her case against you. It might be wise to arrange a meeting elsewhere. You could even divide the legal fees with her. His eyes drifted downward to Sherry, unconscious on the dining room floor. It wasn't exactly a collapse, more like a balloon gradually losing air as she sank to the ground. So much for being a seasoned consultant, but that no longer mattered. The documents I had meticulously prepared conveyed everything necessary. I neatly printed my findings, folded them, and placed them on her chest. She would find them when she regained consciousness. In the meantime, my attorney, Mrs. Jimmy Jam, and I were off to dine at the finest barbecue restaurant in town. I hope Sherry realizes that once that door shuts behind her today, there's no turning back. I need to change the locks. It's reached a point where I can't even enjoy a meal in peace. Sherry has called me 10 times already, and I've had to silence her. At that moment, Mrs. Jimmy Jam was regaling me with one of her humorous tales about her wayward husband. She joked about writing a book titled Life with a Dog. It turned out Sherry wasn't the only woman in his life. She even offered to provide me with the addresses of the other wives, so I could share my strategy with their husbands once mine was finalized. After all, we didn't want everyone turning the tables at the same time, right? I refocused on her story, but things were far from straightforward. Sherry wasn't ready to end the marriage. She was genuinely remorseful and swore it would never happen again, insisting she had learned from her mistakes. For 5 months, she fought to salvage our relationship, but eventually, she surrendered, signed the divorce papers, and returned to her hometown. By the time the legal proceedings commenced, Jameson had caught the media's attention. The judge, an eccentric old-timer with 2 ex-wives, allowed me to testify as a witness. The courtroom erupted in laughter when Jameson attempted to blend into the background. Surprisingly, he turned out to be quite affluent, owning half of a car dealership. In the end, I received a far larger settlement than expected. Mrs. Jameson secured the house and a quarter of the dealership. Once everything was finalized, she shared my findings with the other 3 husbands. Jameson was fortunate to retain his job as a car salesman rather than a stake in the dealership. For nearly 3 years, I distanced myself from relationships until I met a fiery redhead from the countryside, a widow with 2 young sons. I started coaching her kids in soccer when a friend persuaded me to give dating another shot. Initially, things didn't click between us, but over time, we grew closer. She often playfully mocked my chivalrous gestures, holding doors open, pulling out chairs at restaurants, and always being attentive in social settings. She kept teasing until our 3rd date, when I finally lost patience. I told her, "If you don't appreciate being treated like a lady, that's your choice. But if you're with me, I will treat you that way. If you prefer being disrespected, go back to where you came from." She looked bewildered but remained silent, waiting for me to open her car door. We drove home in complete silence. Later, as I escorted her to her doorstep, she apologized. I did my best to explain my perspective. I was raised with certain values, My grandfather believed women should be treated with dignity in public, like a lady, and as an equal partner in private. Of course, he had his own opinions on intimacy. Her eyes shimmered in the moonlight as she asked, "And if I were to be in a relationship with you, how would you treat me in that intimate space?" I replied, "I would cherish you as an extraordinary individual, ensuring our time together is unforgettable. My intention isn't to dominate or control, but to be a partner who leaves you feeling completely fulfilled. But I believe we haven't reached that moment yet. Do you know what might be holding you back?" Overanalyzing. The next morning, we were late picking up the boys, and her mother gave us a knowing smile. A year later, as we gathered them around the table to share the news that in 5 months I would officially become their new father, they erupted with excitement. We had a playful dynamic, and I joked with the eldest, telling him he'd be the one carrying the wedding ring. The youngest, curious about his role, asked, "What will my part be?" I smirked and said, "Well, we'll need a flower girl." His eyes widened in horror. "Mommy, Daddy wants me to be the flower girl," he exclaimed. I chuckled and reassured him, "You look absolutely fabulous in the dress." His lip quivered, so I pulled him into my arms and sat him on my lap. "I'm just kidding, son. How about you carry the ring, and your brother will be the best man?" No one objected, and that's exactly how it happened. 5 years later, it's amusing to hear them grumble about having to watch over their little sister. After that, I never saw Sherry again. According to my older brother, she lived alone and worked 2 jobs to support herself after the divorce. It was as if she had vanished. And you know what? I don't regret for a second that Sherry betrayed me or that our marriage ended. In fact, I'm thankful, because now I'm truly happy with a woman who blessed me with a daughter. The only thing I regret? Wasting 27 years on someone who never deserved me. This concludes the story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.